Hi everybody, I'm Dr. Amelia Aldea. Welcome to Therapy Corner. And today I wanted to talk to you about exposure. Exposure is a key component of cognitive behavioral therapy, of CBT, and I've been talking about it a lot in my videos. So I figured today I would spend a few minutes sort of giving you a good overview of what exposure is, what it isn't, and what are the key benefits. So stay tuned. So exposure. It's a key component of CBT, of cognitive behavioral therapy, for the treatment of anxiety disorders. And it's very simple. It basically entails coming into contact with all those situations, people, emotions, etc., that make us feel anxious. And the more we do it, the more we get control of our anxiety. Now, let me unpack this because it sounds very paradoxical, right? Let's imagine last time you were feeling really anxious about something. Maybe that was going on a date, or applying for a job, or taking an exam, or having a difficult conversation with someone. You were probably having all kinds of anxious thoughts in anticipation, right? So for example, what if my date doesn't like me? What if they think I'm boring? What if they're not attracted to me? What if I say the wrong things? What if the date is a total disaster? What if I never date anybody again? What if I end up single? We all have all kinds of anxious thoughts running through our head. And what happens most of the time is that when we do that thing that makes us really anxious, we end up realizing that it wasn't as bad as we thought it would be. And the same applies to positive emotions, by the way. Think about, last time that you were very excited about a trip or a vacation or something good happening, right? And how much you played it up in your head. And then when the event happened, okay, maybe it was fun, maybe it was great, but more often than not, it was probably not as good, not as exciting as you anticipated it to be. Right? So we humans tend to be pretty bad about anticipating the future, and particularly bad about anticipating how we're going to feel in the future. So one of the best ways of actually fighting anxiety is to do those very things that we are afraid of doing, because when we do those things, we realize that we had played up a lot of that stuff in our heads. Now, I'm not saying that, every situation is easy, or that, the minute we do something, we no longer feel anxious about it. But the more we get ourselves into that habit, the more progress we make. And there's literally decades of scientific research supporting the effectiveness of exposure and of CBT more broadly for treating anxiety disorders. So how does exposure work? Well, usually the therapist and the client come up with a list of things that make the client anxious. So back to the example of somebody dating, it could be, to set up an online profile, to send a message to somebody, to have a conversation with somebody, to set up a date, to go on the date, and so on and so forth. So basically the therapist and the client are going to write it all out, and the client is going to identify how much anxiety they think each one of the situations would provoke. And we use this thing called subjective units of distress, or SUDS, and it's basically a rating from 0 to 100. And so the client identifies how much anxiety a given situation might give them. Is it a 10, is it a 20, or is it an 80, or is it a 90? And after they do that, with the therapist, they actually organize them in a hierarchy, going from very little anxiety to very high anxiety. So the goal is for the client to begin practicing exposures to situations that produce low levels of anxiety, and to slowly move up the hierarchy. Now, what is really important here as well is to identify safety behaviors. So these are behaviors that clients engage in order to reduce anxiety, and sometimes they might not be very aware that they're doing them. So, for example, I don't know, if somebody is afraid of public speaking, sometimes they may over-prepare. Or they might wear a particular shirt because it brings them good luck. Or they might engage in some sort of ritual before getting in front of people. So all of these safety rituals, all of these safety behaviors reduce anxiety in the short term, right? They act as a clutch, but they don't really help the person get over their anxiety in the long term. In fact, you can even argue that they make the anxiety worse. So as clients move up the fear hierarchy and they face situations that are more and more anxiety provoking, it becomes really important to begin to eliminate or to remove those safety behaviors. So for example, you could give a talk in front of people with your favorite, lucky shirt, and then give the same talk or a similar talk to that group of people without the lucky shirt. So identifying safety behaviors can be critical, can be crucial to doing successful exposure. And here is where the client and the therapist have to work together. It requires the client sort of being very in tuned and being willing to explore all the different ways, all the different clutches they've been using over the years to reduce their anxiety. And from the therapist perspective, it requires somebody to be asking the right questions of their clients and listening for the right answers. It requires a lot of compassionate listening, and a lot of paying attention more broadly. Now, I think that is key to the success of exposure is consistency and practice. It's important to do exposure session after session after session to begin to chirp away at the hierarchy. And it's equally, if not more important, to practice exposure in between sessions. And of course, under the guidance of a therapist who will set up the practice, right? And here, the best analogy I can come up with is that of personal training. You may have a personal trainer you see once a week and get a great workout. But if you really want to get in shape, you have to keep showing up to the gym day after day and keep exercising. In this case, the mind is not different than the body. If you want to overcome your anxiety, if you want to get better at managing your anxiety, you have to keep practicing. And you have to do so with a mental health professional. Now, at the end of every exposure, it's also very important to do debriefing, to figure out what worked and what didn't, and also to identify any potentially new safety behaviors that might have come up. Remember, it's really important to identify these so we can remove them and so that we can better face our anxiety and, of course, get better control of our anxiety. Now, it can be very hard to find a therapist, a good CBT therapist who will do exposure. Many therapists claim to do CBT, but actually don't do exposure with their anxiety clients. There's data suggesting that fewer than 30% of therapists who claim to be doing CBT for anxiety are actually helping their clients learn exposure exercises. So if you're interested in doing exposure, it's not enough to find somebody who claims to be a CBT therapist. You also need to ask them, do they do exposure with their clients? How frequently? Will they be doing exposure with a client like yourself? These are key questions in order to make sure that you find the best care available. So guys, this brings us to the end of the video on exposure. If you have any questions, any comments, as always, please leave them in the section below. And as always, if you suspect that you or someone that you know may be struggling, maybe having a mental health problem, remember it's very important. I encourage you strongly to go seek the help of a mental health professional. If you enjoy the content, if you like the videos, don't forget to like, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, and please share with friends, family members, with people in your life. You can do so in a number of ways. You can share links to the video, or you can share my posts on social media. I'm Dr. Amelia Aldeo, both on Twitter and on Instagram. Thank you so much, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye.